Hi, I'm Jake.
And I'm Steven.
Welcome to Tales from the SaaS Graveyard, where we talk to employees at tech companies that are in the middle of the bell curve, not going out of business, but definitely not hitting the big time. The SaaS Graveyard is a purgatory populated by companies that have made it to the annual revenues in the 30 to 50 million range, but can't get to the next level, which is pretty impressive outside of Silicon Valley, but frowned upon here.
We interview folks in various roles about their experience working at companies like this. We look to see what common themes emerge across industries and roles. Today, we will spend time with our friend David, who will talk about his first job as a developer at a user guidance company focusing on tooltips that we will call Clippy. David left his home in Minnesota to join a Boston based Series A company. Before we talk to David, Jake, have you ever moved anywhere for a job?
So I haven't necessarily moved somewhere specifically for a job, but I have. I was once, I lived outside of the Bay Area for about 5 years, and I was moving back, and that's why I was looking for jobs in the Bay Area. Even though so I had to use my in-laws' address to make it pretend like I lived in the Bay Area. And at the time, right before I came back, I was doing some traveling, and I started looking for jobs while I was traveling, and I noticed that there was a travel company that was looking for someone, and so I sent in my resume with my fake San Francisco address. But in my cover letter, I mentioned that I was qualified for the job, and also I love to travel and was currently traveling. And I did get a response pretty quickly from that company. I actually had my first phone screen when from my internet cafe in Thailand, and the hiring manager mentioned that my resume really stood out because I was traveling. And so I often think that my career in tech had a big boost from that trip to Thailand. How about you?
Wow, that's pretty impressive, Jake. I haven't actually moved anywhere specific for a job outside of moving from college to my first role. But I might have to try that whole Thailand thing out for whenever I'm applying to jobs next. But I do know the importance of you got to have that address in the same city or in the same area as the companies you're applying to, because it's just such a quick way for that hiring manager to filter your resume out, even if you're really passionate about the company, because they might just think, oh, this person's trying to move here, or are they really serious? Or they just applying to a ton of roles that they're just seeing anywhere there. So if you can leverage, a friend or family's address or anything like that, when you're applying to roles, I highly recommend it because you're most likely going to get a higher return on effort there, I would say.
Which I think in retrospect, it's ridiculous that you use somebody else's address. Because let's say you just pick some random address in San Francisco. It's not like your employer would have gone and knocked on the door and seen like, "Hey, does Jake really live here?" You just need to put that fake address up on your resume. But I think everyone does. They try and put an address of a friend or a relative to make it seem realistic and to have that phone number with the area code that matches the city. But now in this post-COVID world, it doesn't really matter. But that's what we'll be telling our grandkids about what we used to do.
Oh yeah, we will. And with that, well, let's hear about David's experience moving for his first developer role. David, welcome to the SaaS Graveyard.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So before we get into it, let's talk a little bit about what you were doing beforehand. Before you joined Clippy. How in your career did you end up there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I went to a small liberal arts college in the Upper East Coast, and kind of, true to liberal arts fashion. I think I went in thinking kind of uh, dead set on being a biochem and physics double major. You know, I was really into kind of like the folding at home kind of a realm when I was in high school. Like, oh, like how do you fold proteins, and then if you knew how they fold, then you can like make proteins, sequences that can like go and treat a bunch of diseases. So I was really into that in high school. I went to college and then realized I was actually really bad at chemistry. Took my one and only computer science course, the 101 or the equivalent, and that was my worst grade in all of college. So I didn't actually touch computer science again for the rest of college. Ended up graduating with a double degree in biology and music. I spent one of a 2-year program doing a master's in music composition and piano performance. Dropped out of that because I realized everyone else was way better than me, and kind of leaned back on my biology degree and somehow lucked into a job working in the environmental health and safety department at 3M. So it was interesting because biology was kind of a stretch already for kind of working this department, most of the people that I worked with there were, a combination of like chemistry or biochem, and things like that. So, like I said, I was really bad at chemistry. So, it's kind of weird that I was there. And so it was like living in Excel, which I don't miss at all. That's what I was doing, is a lot of like taking a set of rules and applying it on changing but very similar types of data, like similarly structured data, and kind of found myself doing the same task over and over and over again, and it was incredibly boring. Um, so I had friends from high school and in college who kind of went into the tech industry, and obviously kept in touch, and they said, hey, I think you would really enjoy kind of the software side of it. And it sounds like, it's like basically what you're doing, but instead of doing it for, in Excel, you can actually write some code to do it. So I kind of, taught myself some scripting, kind of brushed off my like notes or lack thereof from my only computer science course from college, and kind of just like taught myself during the time. And one of the things I did was I ended up writing I think it was Ruby script, that used the Ruby XL gem, and connected to the Microsoft SQL Server, and I had it run the query. So I had like a little like command line interface to like type in like where I was drawing the specific regulatory report from, and then it would then I would also define like which chemical databases to go look at, and then also like the name of the Excel file I wanted to create. And so I actually ended up automating my entire job, as well as like everyone else that I worked with there who had been there for 5, 10, 15 years, kind of doing this thing over and over again. um, and I think I would come in. I didn't want to be too, I guess maybe pompous, or like, I didn't want to be too obvious, because I was like, oh, I'm getting paid by this company to like learn how to code. That's kind of how I treated it.
Mhm.
And so then I ended up, I would show up to work on Monday morning. I would run these scripts for, I think a decent like regulatory analyst would do something around like 1 to 2 reports per week, and I would do 4, because, I want to be better than the median, but not like so crazy that someone like starts asking questions about my reports. And it took maybe 10 or 15 minutes to run. Um, and I did that. And then for the rest of the week, from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I would just go read Hacker News. I would go read, I think it was like Code Wars, and like this was way before Leak Code, and so it was like cracking the code interview, and like all these different things of like, how do I get a job in tech as a software engineer, and kind of just like doing messing around with projects and things like that on 3M's dime, unfortunately. So I did that for about 2 months, and then I got a call, or not a call, a message from my immediate manager, who got a message from his like manager's boss in 3M. Like each department has like they're called like a lab manager, like they're the boss of the entire department. And I was terrified, because like, oh no, like they're gonna fire me, because they know that like I barely do any work now. So I kind of went in, very very terrified. There's I was in Minnesota, and a lot of Scandinavians, like a big, tall, Swedish American guy. These like piercing blue eyes, and I just remember like being very very intimidated by this man. And he said, I was like, he's like asking me about my work, and I was like, oh crap, like I'm gonna get fired from my first job. And then he said my manager actually had nominated me to him to nominate to like the departments for like this award for having the best, like, and most consistent and high quality reports, and like at a very high velocity. And so back then I was very, let's say, bought into kind of like the loyalty to corporations. So I was like, oh no no no, I didn't do anything, I just like kind of automated, but I would love to kind of get this on a server or something somewhere, so that the rest of the team could kind of benefit from this, and then we can maybe go focus on like different problems, instead of like running these same type of reports day in and day out. And also from like a hiring perspective, I think if we kind of focused more on like CS or like statistics folks, we could probably end up doing a lot more these types of automations to make like the department much more efficient. And I was really thinking this from the lens of like, oh, if 3M is a business, like how do I carve an area within this company that, I can be very helpful and then also have a career that I want. I wasn't really thinking about it in a different way. Very
Hmm.
poor company politics, which, I can touch on about in the actual tech industry. And so, I mean, this guy thought it was a great idea. He introduced me a bunch of people. And obviously, what happened was all my teammates who had been there, at the company for, 5, 10, 15 years, they were not so happy about this because I was changing kind of their way of life and kind of what they knew and, how they viewed, 3M as an employer and their work and their job. So I actually got reassigned from this department to the waste team. And to my understanding today, I'm pretty sure the waste team at 3M is like where 3M sends all their people when they want their careers to go die. And I think that time I realized like I need to get out of here and think about, how do I do it. So I did kind of look in the Twin Cities area, but the tech scene there was not very good, back in 2015 and in like early 2016. So I kind of was like, well, I went to school on the East Coast. I kind of want to go back there. So I kind of looked in the Boston area, and just and at the time I thought, I applied to a bunch of places. I think I ended up applying to maybe 10 places, and I heard back from 7 of them and ended up getting offers for 3. So one of them was I would say a pretty large and publicly traded like fitness tracking company. But it was, the position was like a junior software engineer writing backend services in Java. I didn't know Java, and also that was the language that was taught in my worst grade performance in college. So I was like, I don't want to do this. The other one was a about the same size as a startup that I ended up going to. That was in the kind of like restaurant point of sale space, and they're not public, but I think they're a borderline unicorn before all the COVID pandemic stuff hit. But that was also in Java, so I said I don't know about that, and then we kind of settled on this. I kind of settled on this one thing called I think we're calling it Clippy, which was kind of like a tooltip company, helped user onboarding. And things like that. And all around the same time, I think had started watching Silicon Valley, and I was like really, really bought into this idea that I want to go to a really, really small startup at the ground level and like build something really cool. And it was like a shared office space, actually in the same floor as this like restaurant point of sale system startup, and had like these swings and like a ping pong table. And I was like, oh yeah, this is definitely what I want to do. So that's kind of how I ended up in Boston.
Awesome. And you just applied to Clippy just out of the blue, or did you have any connections there that influenced you to apply there?
Nope, straight out of the blue. I don't. I think I used AngelList for that, but I can't. I'm not actually entirely sure if that was. I think I used like a combination of like the LinkedIn, job boards and like Hacker News postings.
Hmm.
But yeah, uh, I did have friends in the industry, but I had a really bad case of imposter syndrome. I was like, oh, I'm not. I didn't have a CS degree. Like I don't really know if I know how to code that well, so I'm going to go work at a different company, as best to like of my ability to get in
Hmm.
there, and then after a couple years, maybe I can go ask for like a referral to their, what I thought at the time were like more legit companies.
Got it. And what was the interview process like?
Yeah, the interview process was really strange. So, I didn't understand the whole concept of like, you know, I didn't, I think I even wrote on my like resume that I was in Boston. This was before, I think I had like signed a lease that wasn't starting for like another couple months in the, I guess, Somerville area. But, I didn't want them to think that I was like from Minnesota to, improve my candidacy. So like I actually ended up flying out, on my own money to go interview at these places, and mostly it was in person. It was 2 interviews. One was kind of like your more standard. They gave me like a take home assignment, I guess, beforehand, um, which was like some light, very light, like HTML and like templating really more than anything. And then the in-person one was kind of like, very, very basic questions on like the browser and nothing really hard. I don't think they really even asked me to code like a hard algorithm. Maybe it was something with like string manipulation. But yeah, after that, it was kind of, lunch with the team. They got me uh, this at this barbecue place that I actually really, really like. That was the first time I'd been there, and I've gone there many times since. um, and that was kind of it. And then they were like, "Yeah, we'll get back to you." And I don't know if I was like their top candidate or not. I don't know if I did well. Like I said, I didn't actually interview at that
Mhm.
many places, so um, I, they kind of said, and I was like, they're also from a tech stack. It was interesting to me because they were working in JavaScript, which was, like in 2015 was like definitely turning the corner. And, being the hot thing, they were, using React, which I just only read about. And, having taught myself Ruby, they were, had a large portion of their backend written in Elixir, which is kind of like an evolution of kind of from like the Ruby community. So I was like, yes, this is like the tech stack that I want to work in. And it's not Java and it's a startup. So that's kind of why I decided to join.
Got it. Now, is there any one piece of information you wish you knew before you accepted the offer?
Oh yeah, so many. I think I should have asked like, what is the runway? What is the funding situation like? What is your business model? Like, how do you guys make money? Right? I didn't really even understand that it was a tooltip company. I really thought it was just like I actually didn't really know. I just thought they partnered with like different startups and like made their apps better because that's how it was kind of pitched to me. From like the
Hmm.
initial interview. I didn't realize it was like a layer that sits on top of something else. And yeah, so definitely wish I had asked those questions or had those things been clear. Also, I don't know if any company will do this, but really more information on how like the compensation part works in terms of like startup equity as well as like um, the types of benefits that you would expect from like at this point it was a seed stage company, and I had no idea. I was just really really very keen on working in a startup. So yeah, wish I had known like more about the kind of business side of it and not so much focused on like I want to work at a startup and I want to work in these technologies that I think are kind of the hottest trend right now.
Got it.
When you say that you weren't clear on the compensation or how the equity worked, what did they offer and what did you not understand?
So they offered a I think options. What is it like ISOs? And didn't ask to what is this even representative of? Like 5,000 options. I mean that sounds like a lot. If there's, but I didn't know how many it was out of. Right, I don't know what the employee pool looked like, and I wish I had asked that before going in. And I think even from a compensation side, like I didn't really understand the difference between like kind of the industries I was switching from like more of like a big company where especially in the lower cost of living area to kind of working at a startup. So I didn't really know what my market worth was. I do know that the cash offer was lower than either of the other two offers that I got, but I didn't realize that I could have just asked and for more or anything like that. It was just like more standard like job negotiating tactics that it.
Now, of course, you were still in Minnesota while you were
Yeah.
applying to all these jobs. Did you have to move earlier, or did that throw off your plan with your lease at all for starting?
Um, Actually, it didn't really. It actually ended up working out pretty well. Yeah, I think I accepted the offer and I rented a van and packed all the stuff and then I drove and then drove from Minnesota to Boston.
So now that you're starting at Clippy, let's hear a little bit about your first month. Like, what did that look like?
I mean, I was so stoked. I think that first month I was just so happy to not have to one wear a button down tucked into khakis with dress shoes to work. Two, like I didn't have to like be in at the office at a certain time, so that like the more flexibility was cool. And then like I mentioned, I think the ping pong table, that was like a huge benefit for me. Like I love just like goofing off and hanging out with coworkers, so that was definitely missing at 3M. And that that was in spades here. So that was super fun, just like having that concept of like, oh, I can be friends with a coworker but also like be getting paid to do it. So it was a lot of fun. And in terms of like the type of work I was doing, I mean, a lot of it ended up being doing like uh, kind of like bug support slash tech support for the existing product. And I just kind of thought, I was like, oh, this is just like a rite of passage of you know that's also kind of explained to me, rite of passage of like everyone who joins, as well as like a good way to get an overview of like how our systems work. So while it wasn't like the type of code all day every day type of life I was imagining, I was still
Hmm.
pretty excited about it. And I think I mentioned this earlier, but the company was actually very transparent in terms of like um, the compensation philosophy, like the financial health of the company and everything, and could look up that information. And so that was also really cool to see. Also, I don't think I'd ever seen a bank balance that was over 7 figures. And when they had an over 7 figure bank balance, like, oh, this is how much cash we have left in bank. I was like, wow, this is more money than I've ever seen in my life. So we're in a really good spot.
Love it. Now, were there any red flags in that first month or any weirdness that you noticed?
Yeah, there definitely was. I think the big thing that I noticed was I wasn't so like I kind of mentioned like the tech stack being one of the big sells for me. Like getting to work in modern JavaScript using and then writing in React, as well as like maybe exploring more in like the Elixir and like the services side. And the kind of the project that I was doing kind of tech support for was a Backbone JS app, and written in CoffeeScript. And I'll just be like upfront, but like I actually hadn't really written any JavaScript moving up. So going from like Ruby scripting language to CoffeeScript was like one of the most jarring experiences. And there was no help, right? It was just kind of like, hey, go figure this out. I kind of I don't know. I don't know exactly what I was expecting, but I kind of thought that maybe I could like tap one of the other engineers to like help me get set up. But it really wasn't like that. It was just like, here's a Backbone app. Here's like a bunch of bugs that like, our customers have reported, and like go figure out how to fix them. So I really felt like, wow, like I'm in way over my head. And I'm also, not getting kind of the support I need. Plus, I'm not working on the, languages and technologies that I thought I would be.
Was the culture just that you couldn't ask anyone for help, or why were you left so alone?
Yeah, so I would say the culture was kind of like that. I think I was the first, I think, junior hire that they made on the engineering team. So they didn't really have a process set up to kind of, onboard me or like kind of help me figure out like what I'm supposed to be doing. And like I said, like the backbone side of the application stack was the biggest legacy piece, and all the other engineers who were working on kind of like the new world of stuff, which was at the time I didn't realize it was that. At the time, I felt like it was way different. I didn't feel comfortable asking them, and there was a lot of kind of talk about like how important like these new projects were for our revenue goals and like our sales goals. And so there was a lot of protection that the CEO kind of protected more of the senior engineers and was very protective of their time. So I'm sure if like I were a senior engineer early on, I would have loved it. But as the only junior, it was definitely uh, not the place to learn a bunch of stuff.
And overall, what did you think of your colleagues? You came from 3M, where you said that you were significantly younger than everybody else, and now you're at a younger company. What was your overall impressions
Oh,
of
I
them?
think I loved them. I was super excited. I looked up to them, and kind of with that imposter syndrome of being like a self-taught dev. I saw these guys with and girls with like computer science degrees with like company names in tech that I recognized, and I was like, dang, like these guys know how to code, and I don't understand how they can just know all these things about application development. Like, where did they learn all these things? I'm so far behind. Um, kind of thing. So I really looked up to them in terms of their technical chops and experience. There was one engineer in particular who was actually quite helpful to me, and to this day, I think um, one of the a pretty big influence in what I like to subscribe to in terms of being helpful. He was one of the more senior engineers, but he also made time for me, like, the weekends and like, late at night to help me like get set up, because he understood that I was kind of brought on with like zero um, resources or process to help me get set up.
Another thing about when you started, you mentioned like the sort of, it seems like it sounds like a very stereotypical startup office. Was there the stereotypical like new employee swag of like, do you get a hoodie, or what sort of stuff did they give out when you first got there?
Yeah, so they just had these like buckets of so many t-shirts of very different varied styles, and me being a somewhat cheapskate when it comes to clothing, I mean, it was awesome. Like, I would I think I still have a bunch of their t-shirts, because it was just kind of like, yeah, if you want a t-shirt, just grab one. So it was definitely a lot of t-shirts, a lot of stickers. We got hoodies. So it was kind of like that swag, and definitely like, representation in the office was like everyone had their stickers and their shirts, and so I think there were hats as well that everyone was kind of wearing all the time in the office.
And then, in terms of, you mentioned the ping pong table. What were the other sort of daily perks that were within the office?
Yeah, I think we did. There was a lot of alcohol, but like because we were only, I think 15 when I started. It wasn't like we had like a beer on top, or and I thought it was just one of the other engineers was like a huge, craft brewery or craft beer guy. So there was like a craft beer place that was like a couple blocks away from the office, and so like every couple of days he would just go down there with the company card, and then get a bunch of different types of craft beer, and then bring them in and stock up our tiny little beer fridge in the office. And so there was a lot of that. And then I think we did, when I started, we did twice a week lunches, where we would kind of all huddle around this, that like, I'm sure you've seen it, the same like one IKEA table, um, and then eating various places from takeout, or we would go to the restaurant itself and eat as a group. And then as we started getting bigger, and our runway, our cash and bank started to diminish, it went to once a week, and then I think once every other week.
And when it was it was truly the whole company, from the CEO down to, I guess yourself as the junior developer.
Yeah, it was everybody.
Could you build up a rapport with the CEO, or was there a distance because, of your position versus his?
So yeah, that was interesting to me, because during the whole interview process, I think I talked to the CEO probably 3 or 4 times, which I thought was also pretty cool, because at the other two companies I didn't talk to the CEO at all.
Mhm.
Um, and the other thing that was interesting was like the CEO was also a self-taught dev, and so there's a lot of things that you know, we shared in terms of like experiences, and like how do you deal with imposter syndrome, and kind of he um, so I would say, like, initially I felt that I could be pretty open and honest, and like have conversations, and I didn't really feel that there was a big distance, outside of the fact that you know there was a very clear kind of unspoken rule that the more senior engineers times is the most valuable. So if I have questions, it was kind of good luck.
And so, back to the work, you were, sort of introduced as like working on the bugs, and so you're sort of fine with that as a way to learn.
hmm
How long were you doing that until you started to get a little tired or wanted to do something more challenging?
So by nature, I'm a pretty impatient person. So it was probably maybe 3 or 4 months into it where I felt I was getting really, really impatient. I think I kind of were, talked to my friends who are also in the same, industry in the area, and they were confused. They're like, I think I did some bug fixes like my first couple of weeks, but then after that, like I was doing feature work. Um,
Yep.
and so I was like, well, I think it's, you guys are working at bigger companies, it's different. Um, so I think like month 3 into 4, I was really feeling kind of more and more kind of, I guess, resentful towards the fact that I was not doing feature work. And I think the part that really kind of hammered home um, kind of the feeling of like frustration was when we ended up going to hire more engineers. So I think one of the things they did like about me was like I'd ended up going to squash a ton of bugs, and I wrote a bunch of like documentation and things like that. Um, and so like I can definitely see it now in my career. Like you don't really want to repurpose that very productive employee because they're doing like cleaning up a lot of stuff that no one else really wants to do. So if he's doing a really good job, then you should keep him there. So it was kind of, then they're like, okay, we need actually to hire more engineers, and obviously, when the younger the startup is, you don't have as much kind of cash to play around with, so you're trying to find you know the younger and hungrier folks. So we ended up hiring um, kind of 2 more junior engineers. So I was kind of the first one at the company, and then they hired 2 more. And I think that's when this was about 3 or 4 months after I started, and this is where it kind of became clear to me that like my case was the kind of outlier where kind of they joined and neither of them did any of these like got assigned these like bug tickets or like bug fixing type of work, and they were immediately kind of assigned to a senior engineer, and then they were like, here's, you're going to learn how to write modern JavaScript and React, and you're going to start working on feature work right away.
Right. So yeah, which is exactly what you had wanted to do.
Yep.
So when this happens, what recourse did you have?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not shy about being open and honest. So I did, bring it up to the CEO, and my manager, that like, hey, like, I feel like I'm being kind of shoehorned into this area. And while I was okay doing it, when I thought this is what the junior, engineers are doing at the company, I feel like it's become clear that this is not what we're doing. So I would like to, I've been wanting to go more over doing future work and things like that. So like, what do I need to do to get there? Um, and so they were, and then I think at the same time, I think, because, salaries and compensation was all transparent, I also kind of noticed that both these other junior hires were, came in significantly higher than what I had come in at. So I was like, kind of, curious about that part too. So they were like, well, we can't do anything about what you came in at, but we can try to expedite a promotion. So I actually ended up getting a promotion about 4.5 to 5 months into my time here, and brought me kind of like closer in parity to like what these newer engineers are making. And then in terms of the actual work, they were very diplomatic in telling me kind of what I just mentioned about you're really good at doing kind of these bug fixes and like supporting our legacy product, and kind of all the new feature work is like in a different tech stack, and you don't really know that well, and we don't have the bandwidth right now to kind of teach you these things. If you want to do it, and this is the CEO kind of talking to me over a lunch, or one-on-one lunch one day, was saying, I had to do the same thing when I worked at, his whatever company he did 4 or 5 years ago, and he was like, you need to, just figure it out on the side. So if I try to find a project that would be a new feature or new application for the company, and then you write it in kind of like that modern JavaScript and React that you want to do it, and then teach yourself there. But he also made it very clear. He said, "But you do not ask any of the senior engineers for help on this because it really needs to be a self-contained project." So I remember taking that, and I didn't really think it was unfair or kind of out of the ordinary or beyond the pale. I just kind of think, oh, this is just like a challenge, and I will prove the haters wrong, kind of thing. So and at the same time, the CEO said, but at the same time, I need you to keep doing all these like bug fixes and support issues.
Right. So
So
this is on your spare time. Do this
yep.
extra work
Yeah.
for us.
Yeah. So, back then I took, like I said, I was very into like the startup culture. It's like, yes, everyone has to wear many hats, and like people need to, live and breathe and bleed the startup, company culture. So I was like, yeah, I got this. So I rolled up my sleeves, and I think, I was, from probably like 8 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon. I was doing like bug fixes and like tech support documentation, and like even talking to customers and like hopping on sales calls to like help them, answer any technical questions about our product, our legacy product. And then from like 4:30 to 10:30 p.m., 11 p.m., midnight, I was just trying to like read up as much as I could about like the React library, like what the heck is JavaScript, because I don't been writing like coffee script at this point. Um, and then I was like trying to figure out what do I need to build. So then, having been there and having been a lot of sales calls and customer calls, I think the biggest thing that Clippy was kind of missing was being able to show like the kind of product value to potential customers, because I think the sales demo tool was basically just like a static uh, like HTML page, which doesn't really showcase like it could be work, like you could use kind of Clippy for an actual web application if you're only showing me like a single HTML page. So like, okay, let me make an actual full like business application type thing, and then we can install Clippy in there in the best like tightly integrated way we can. Then the sales can kind of use that as a tool, and then on top of that, I said, and then there's kind of other side. I also want to kind of streamline kind of all the types of bug requests that are coming in, as well as like any sort of like all this technical documentation I'm writing, because we didn't use Confluence at the time. I think we experimented with a bunch of different tools, and none of them stuck. So I wanted like a nice like wiki that people can search internally. So I ended up building like an internal dashboard of like kind of like the health of our various clients and their integrations, and then kind of this like demo sales demo tool, which ended up being kind of like a clone of, I guess, like Trello type of thing. And I did this in React. It was terribly written, zero code review, and I got it working. And I hustled really really hard, and I think I wrote both of those in about 2 months. Um, and I don't know if I felt a sense of accomplishment afterward, um, because I had no idea if the code that I wrote was good or bad, because no one else had looked at it. I just knew that it worked, and that it did seem to bring the business value. And actually, the sales team, I just heard a lot of praise from the sales team, like this has made our jobs way way easier. And I remember like because like a lot of tech sales, like a lot of their compensation is from commission, so they were closing deals left and right with this thing. And so like I got a lot of free stuff from them, as like thank you gifts. And I didn't really think much of it at the time, but then I realized, wow, I probably just made their jobs. I did make their jobs way easier. So.
The two ideas that you have when you started working on these on your own, did you tell other people in the company, "Hey, I'm going to do this," and did you get feedback from them on just whether these were the right projects to start?
So yeah, I mean, so part of that discussion I had with the CEO was like, anything that you come up with, just talk to me directly. So, I really took that as like, oh, the CEO's like picked me out as like, his go-to guy. And, so I didn't really talk to a lot of the other engineers about what I was doing. It was kind of like, this is like my little secret project between the CEO and me. And then if I do really well, then like, good things are in store for me at this company.
So, I mean, so you completed the projects. It sounds like the sales team really reacted well. What was the CEO's reaction to the stuff you had done?
So I mean, he was like, "This is awesome," but then he kind of went through the code, and he's like, and then he kind of pointed out to me all these places where the code wasn't great, or like this is evidence of why like I'm not ready to do product feature development yet, because I need to nail down these other kind of I guess idiomatic code patterns that I had no idea, obviously, with. And I was like, oh, that's fair. Do you think I could maybe steal one of the senior engineers' time just to get a little bit more feedback? Um, and at this point, he did say yes. So I got, I think, 30 minutes a week with one of the senior engineers to code review my demo app and my like product documentation app.
And so once you have this their time and you're sort of doing this review with them, what was kind of present to you as like the next steps to develop your career?
Yeah, so I think the next step was like getting this into a place where it met the code standards of what the CEO said, and then we can start. Then they was like, then I can easily transition to you into a more product, more prominently product role, and then choose the team that you want to be on.
Hmm.
And so that was kind of the idea. Also, during this whole process, we used to have these like quarterly kind of MVPs. So, like the MVP of the quarter got a additional grant of equity, right? So it's kind of like an honor to get it, and historically, it always been kind of the you know one of the engineers who worked really hard and like got a feature out, right? During that quarter, which it's hard to argue. It's like you're comparing apples and oranges when you're doing the calculation of who should be the MVP. And I really felt at this point that I deserved like at least an MVP nomination, or like a
Hmm.
honorable mention on that. And I think it should have been the end of Q1 of 2017 is probably right around when I finished these two apps, and I kind of put that deadline as a marker of like I want to get these in for the end of the quarter so I can win you know MVP of the quarter.
Right.
Um, and for a company that had been very transparent about all these like processes and things moving forward, the end of Q1 came and it went by. And Similarly, there's one senior engineer who, I think is a great engineer, but there was one particular product that he kind of wrote all by himself, and he didn't really take on any, help from it. Um, and he had been working on this from since like basically when I joined the company, um, and it had just like missed deadline after deadline after deadline, and the goal was to get it in by the end of Q1, and now we were like a little bit into Q2, and it looked like he was going to be done about a month into Q2, and
Hmm.
around that time is when we got kind of like the rumblings about, oh, we're going to have one of these other first twos meetings where we talk about like the quarter or like the monthly financial health of the company and like any other announcements. And then this is where the MVP of the quarter was announced. And lo and behold, it went to this senior engineer who delivered this product for Q1.
And so, I mean, the fact that you were kind of this, you felt obviously disappointed. Like, how did you react at the time?
I probably reacted a bit immaturely, and this is probably like the beginning of my end at this company. Was I felt like I had worked my butt off, and really felt the kind of like the nepotism and like weird politics that really happen when the company is so small, and the early hires end up being like your friends.
Hmm.
Um, and Yeah, I think I was pretty upset about it. I think I, wrote a message to the CEO, and I was like, "Hey, I just want to know like what the um, kind of like the calculation went into for how the MVP was selected." Because it is we are not no longer in Q1 anymore. We're like into Q2. We've been so good about announcing them like correctly at the end of each quarter. What happened here. So yeah, I think I did that, and then there was a lot of crickets that I got back.
And so, at this point, what do are you still at this point revising the code on your two projects?
Yeah, at this point, yeah, I'm still working on those two projects. I think like the sales team had feedback of like, oh, like we want to be able to show like this type of clippy set of features, but like it's very unique to like a specific type of web application like uh, tool.
Hmm.
Can you incorporate it here so that we can show that we do work with that? And so yeah, I was working on those types of, I guess those are technically feature requests, but no real backing behind it outside of just like sales and me, the one junior software engineer.
Right. And you were still doing this after your normal working hours.
Yeah.
And so, you have this disappointment about not being mentioned for the MVP. Are you still working on this really passionately, or is your enthusiasm for it starting to wane?
So my enthusiasm for it is definitely starting to wane at this point. I think I was just like trying to figure out what do I do because you know um, I haven't even been at this company for a year yet, and I'm already feeling this. And I feel like, mentally, there's like, I need to get to that 1 year mark before I can really think of like switching jobs. So I remember talking to like my friends at the time. Like I live in actually a house with four other uh, um, roommates who were software engineers in the Boston tech scene. So they were saying like, yeah, this is not normal. This is not the type of experience we have being like let's do it. So I think around then they're like, do you want to get referred? Um, and I was like, no, I don't know what I would do. So I was kind of just like kind of exploring my options at this point. And then at work, I think I was getting increasingly frustrated about kind of like the sudden lack of like communication from kind of the leadership around, you know, what does it actually mean to be an MVP here, and like what does like a career path look like for people.
All right. So before we'll do a deeper dive on your leaving, there's one thing that you mentioned that I was very curious about. You mentioned that when the other new junior engineers were hired, you knew what their salaries were. So did everyone in the company know everybody's salary?
Yeah.
And how did that work out? Was there? I mean, you mentioned that for yourself. You were a little put off by the fact that these new hires earned more than you. Did it lead to other tensions, or did it actually lead to like? Was there a positive aspect to this?
I think it was pretty positive because pretty much everybody at the same level got the exact same pay. So I think there was a lot of like, I guess, bonding around that. There wasn't any like when, sometimes when you interview with a company and they give you an offer and they're like, there's no wiggle room. Like they were like, yeah, there is really no wiggle room because, if you're coming at this level, then this is the salary that we give you.
Got it. And even
Um,
like across departments, there was no concerns.
Yeah, I can't really think of there being really concerns. I think the one thing that I found from that was that, oh, I am the absolutely lowest paid employee in the entire company.
David, how is the health of the company at this time? Like, did you feel like things are going up and to the right? Were things stagnating?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right around the time at the end of Q1, so like I said, we had like the very transparent financials. I think we had less than significantly less than 1 million in the bank, and it really looked like our cash out date was going, and we were returning customers left and right. Actually, in this space, there was a competitor um, from San Francisco, and you know us in Boston, we have certain opinions about what the San Francisco folks are like, and I'm sure they've got equally um, interesting opinions about our Boston folks. But it was really funny. I think we were right around 25 people there. So there were about 10 new people that had started after I had joined, and there's this company in San Francisco that um, was basically just six people, and they were all six engineers, and they had the pretty much the exact same product we did, and they were priced I think $50 cheaper at every single kind of like price point than we were. And the number one thing that they had that we didn't was specifically kind of like that product that I kind of mentioned. The senior engineer delivered like into Q2 was it was kind of this way of like making sure that your tool tips would show up consistently. And the way that Clippy had done it was very kind of finicky. But the way this like San Francisco company had done it was like basically the same way that we ended up doing it, but they had just gotten there first. And so, all of Q1, we had really lost a lot of business to this, 6% company. And, that was really interesting to see. And at the same time, I think there were a few kind of like key accounts that Clippy had that were, led a lot of, credibility to the kind of company and like, the product. But they had kind of signed on when Clippy was, a 3-person company with no clients. And the volume was so high that we were losing, tens of thousands of dollars every single month because they had so many different users of our product on their platform. So we were trying to like renegotiate those, and those were not going well because this company was kind of like, hey, like I could just go to your competitor and it'd be cheaper, or like, we can also just afford to go to kind of, up market and go to your, other competitor, which is older, but also has a lot more features than you kind of provide. So it, like, I would say we were churning a lot of customers, and we were, this is before I like kind of delivered my sales demo tool. We were not closing a lot of whole new deals. And so I do remember that, the number 400. So we were trying to get to 400 total customers by Q2, by the end of Q2, because if we did, then like it would be a really good signal to our investors that we were, growing our customer base. They weren't as concerned about our revenue at this point, but they were like really concerned about we were constantly growing customers. And I think when I joined, we were around 120 customers, and then um, by Q1 we were, I think, still like around under 200. And during Q, we were still under 200 customers. Um, and after I had delivered that, or but the sales tool go live, we ended up closing a ton of deals, and we got, I think at the end of Q1 we were just under like 350 or something. So it was not quite the 400, but it was like we felt really confident. You know, after Q2 we would have hit that thing. So we're only one quarter behind what kind of the investors were expecting. So I would say the financial health right around like the Q1 Q2 transition was definitely in a very precarious place.
Got it. Now, I guess pivoting to when you're actually leaving Clippy, of course, there's this time of, you didn't win the MVP award. Was there anything else that really triggered you to start considering leaving?
Yeah, I think it was kind of just like more conversations with, as like the longer you spend time like going to meetups or like just, hanging around, friends who are in the same industry, you kind of get to hear their stories of like what they're doing at work, like what their, career progressions look like, or kind of like just what they're, doing day to day. And I'm like, wow, this is very different than the kind of the experience that I've had. And so I was like, I kind of want to join, I think what I've learned has like, how do I write a ton of code really, really poorly, but very, very quickly, right? And I was like, I don't really want
Mhm.
to be that software engineer who writes bad code quickly. I want to be that software engineer who writes like very elegant and efficient code at a reasonable pace. It's like I want to find a place that will let me to do that. And it seems like I just joined kind of at like the inopportune time where I think the newer kind of junior software engineers were getting some more of that kind of support and training, but I just did unluckily didn't get in at the right time for that process to be in place. Um, so it's kind of like thinking, okay, I want whatever I do next, I want, or whatever is fastest possible for me to be able to start getting that type of like mentorship and like career growth in terms of my technical skill set. That was like started to become way, way more important to me.
Now, was there anything that you really appreciated about Clippy that would make you want to stay longer?
Yeah, I do actually like the while we were doing the first twos on a regular basis, as well as like
Hmm.
the transparent compensation bands and like philosophies. I actually really appreciated that. I think not enough companies really do that for fear of like you know unrest and like weird messaging around things. But in terms of like equality and like not accidentally discriminating against like certain groups of people, I think it's like a good step. Obviously, I think there's like at this point there's probably a good balance and trade-off between them. But that is something I did really like about the company, was that in terms of like the company financials and like what we needed to do to get to like kind of like that next level of like either revenue or like investment round. I really like that transparency. So that is something that I do like applaud them for today.
Now, let's hear about when you actually left Clippy. What happened that day?
Yeah, so I think ever since that like Q1 MVP was announced, I was getting very, very resentful and frustrated, and I sent a lot of messages to the CEO. I had sent messages to like the eng manager, and I wasn't getting a whole lot of like good responses, or they were just kind of like everything's busy, like we're trying to get to that 400 customer number. We're also trying to like renegotiate our terms with like our biggest client, as well as like try to figure out how in the heck do we shave off our like AWS bill from being so freaking massive, that we're losing so much money every single month. um, and at the same time, like how do we go and start talking to investors about raising our next round of funding. So I think like they just had a lot bigger concerns at the time, looking back now. But obviously, I was a 24 and a half years old then, and I think the CEO was 28, which looking back now is it's not an old age at all. But as a 24-year-old, you see someone who's 28, that person is like should be very mature and should definitely have everything together. That's kind of the way I viewed it. So I just kind of was getting frustrated, and I was like, hey, can we just talk? And so he's like, sure. So we got into like our one little conference room, and I was talking about like maybe use some expletives about kind of the messaging around like how a quarterly MVPs work, and like who ended up actually winning it, and like the timing of it, and especially, and then my personal career, like I felt like I did not have the same level of support or resources allocated to me, and I any type of support or resources I wanted, it felt like it was a lot of do it on your own time, or really have to fight for it. And in a way that I felt was not helping me grow in my career, right? Very, very selfish
Mhm.
point of view. And so, um, you know, the CEO was kind of saying like, hey, like, you were kind of explaining to me like, you're really good at, you came in like not knowing anything, you learned a bunch of stuff. And then kind of flipped the script and was talking about like all the things I had accomplished and like how good they were for the company. And and then I kept kind of coming back to this idea of like, well, like how did that not factor into this like MVP discussion? How, why is it that like I'm still having to fight for like my right to start working on like true product feature development, um, and things like that? And he's like, yeah, like I hear you. I think you're a valuable member of like the company, but we can't just do that overnight. Um, Kind of things like that. And he's like, we need to come up with a transition plan. And so he's like, let's see, like we need to hire a few more people. And then I think we can maybe transition you into that, the product team that you want to be on, um, in, I think he said like the next 6 to 12 months. Right. And,
Mhm.
obviously like that, looking back now, it's like, it's not that much of a time wait, but, I was very impatient. I had gotten, a promotion, I guess, and comp adjustment within, I guess 4 or 5 months of me being there. And so, I really was not in the mood to kind of wait. And I was like, can we make that, today? And he's like, I don't think I can do that today, because of, it might ruffle the feathers of other people who have been here longer. There's also all the stuff that you're good at that like we don't really have a replacement for right now. Um, and I was like, well, okay, like, should I just go and get some other offers, because it seems like I could go get a product developer offer like today, kind of thing. He's like, I don't want you to do that, but let's think about what we can do. Let's focus on like our transition plan type of thing. And so I was like, are you really think that it could be a 6 month timeline, at the earliest? And he's like, yeah, 6 to 12 months, type of thing. And I was like, well, I don't know if I can wait that long, so I would rather just go find a job today. So that's kind of like how that conversation went. Um, and the CEO, like, I mean, I was definitely irate, was very um, careful, I guess, and didn't want me to, I guess, like rile up some of the other coworkers, because I think a lot of them had been also, I got them to like talk to the CEO, and everything about kind of like my frustrations, because they also agree that hey, it was kind of bogus that this senior engineer, if he had gotten the MVP for Q2, I don't think anybody would have complained, but for Q1, it did seem like a stretch. So that was kind of how that conversation went, and I like the one line I do remember him saying was like, it was kind of, um, the reason why I couldn't move that day was you're very valuable to the company of what you do right now. And like the second thing is, like I mentioned in, some of your code that you wrote for this, like, demo app, like you're just not there in terms of like the code quality to work on our product team yet. So, and, I think those words definitely stung, and they were kind of like, I didn't want to stick around for another 6 months to a year, to have this company who hadn't really supported me in my career development, and see if I could get that somewhere else.
And did you have any stock options at this time to execute?
I did. This is why, like, it's, looking back, it was really dumb because I didn't understand what a cliff was. and and I had been like, if I had waited, I think uh like 6 weeks or something, I would have vested the or gotten the hit the cliff. So I couldn't wait though at that time. So I think looking back, I definitely should have done that, and I did not. And now I know better. But uh, yeah, so but even in the compensation sheet, I think I had the fewest number of stock options. So I don't really know how much it would have been worth today. And it's I've since traded one lottery ticket for another at another startup.
So after that conversation with the CEO, like, did you just walk out that day, or were you there for 2 more weeks, or how was like how was your actual departure?
Yeah. So really, what happened after that was, we had that conversation, and I think I went home pretty much after it. It was like kind of in the early afternoon, so like not too crazy that I left, and then came in kind of the next day, and then he was like, "Well, do you want to stick around for like another week or so, or a couple weeks, or like what do you want to do?" And I was like, honestly, like I don't really want to do any more work here. So it was kind of, I think, yeah. So the next day it's like, okay. So then we like we sat down together, deprovisioned me off of everything, and then I went home after like lunch on that the next day after. So that's how it went.
Did you say bye to your?
I did. I said bye to kind of the coworkers, and I actually had like dinner plans with a couple of them that same day. So then I like went home and then like met them back at the office later to go get dinner.
I love it.
What was their reaction?
I think they were really, I think they were sad to see me leave, but I think they were all kind of at that point, either they like, I would say like every like I said, I joined kind of at an inopportune time. So like I think folks who joined a bit after me had a better experience with like kind of the support and training that they got. And then the folks before me were, definitely too bought in to do anything. So, I think they were definitely bummed out, and they didn't really want to see me leave, and but they definitely understood why I was doing. They agreed that for my personal career that um, I would probably get a faster result by going somewhere else.
And at Clippy, are they still around? How are they doing today?
Yeah, so they ended up raising a Series A round about a year after I left, um, and I think they're still around today. Um, of the people that I worked with then, at least in engineering, I think only one of them is still there.
So, David, if we could take a time machine back to when you had those three offers from those three different tech companies, would you still go with the one from Clippy, or would you have picked a different option?
I would have picked a different option. I think I would have gone to the publicly traded um, fitness tracking company, just because they would have had a bit more. I think they're not like they weren't that big then, and uh, I think they would have had a bit more process in place, as well as kind of just more people just to help me kind of grow in my skill set, and I think the idea of like um, like knowing what I know now, like, it didn't matter that I thought I had chosen the company that had the tech stack that I wanted to work in, um, because I ended up not writing most of my code in that language.
Got it. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
What a journey. I think the most ridiculous thing from the story, Jake, is the fact that David wasn't able to leverage the senior engineer's time at all. I know when I was new at a company, I was always encouraged to go talk to, people who've been at the company for a while or worked on the project just to get more insight. But being literally banned from talking to them was very strange.
Right, and it was ridiculous. Then, as at the end, the CEO dings him for not having perfect code, but he's a junior engineer with no experience, and he's not allowed to talk to anyone. Like, what did the CEO expect? Um, I think it's a bit absurd. And then, you know, he had to do to prove himself. He had to do this hack project outside of normal office hours, and that's sort of fine in one sense. But the thing is, it was then a tool that brought the company a lot of money, and it's just again very strange that something that is going to bring the company value is being done. If you're asking your employer to do this thing that's helping benefiting the company outside of his normal 9 to 5. Like, when is that appropriate to say you have to go above and beyond the 40-hour work week that we hired you for?
Yeah, no, I think that is an interesting point because I feel, at least when I look at it with the teams I work on, is, definitely if you have a live site or an emergency, you have to log on, you have to fix those things, especially if it's business critical. But of course, you should have a process laid out for when you need someone to come on after hours to do those things. And maybe occasionally for a late night push for a final project. But outside of that, I would say most employers shouldn't be asking their employees to work that late past normal hours at that point.
Right, and also it's like this idea, oh, if you want to improve your career, you have to work beyond what's expected of you. That seems a bit unreasonable, but it plays into the myth of a startup that you have to go the extra mile to get the company to take off. That just working that 9 to 5 isn't good enough. If you wanted that, you should go work at a big company instead.
Yeah. But I have to say, though, as a PM, when I know engineers are working hard on the most high priority thing, I'm very happy. But if I know someone's working on a side project that we then have to support and worry about breaking, I don't know if I'd be so stoked about those things being released unless they were a true priority for the company. I want people working on the most important thing, which should be happening during the workday.
Right, and to be worked on by the entire team, talking to each other, not just, hey, junior engineer, go off on your own and figure it out.
Hmm.
Um, the thing that really just jumped out at me is that this is certainly the most heated example we have of quitting we've ever had on the show. That normally people just sort of come to the end, they give their 2 weeks, and then they leave. But to leave on the day just because you were so upset about where your career was going, that's pretty intense.
I wonder how much of David's influence here was based on, what his friends, his housemates were saying and where he should be in his career versus where he was, and this kind of expectation of, oh, I should be doing this type of work and not this type of work, and being so certain in that. Not saying one group was wrong or right, but how much of that influenced him. If his housemates weren't saying that, would he still feel the same way and have left so soon?
Right, because obviously it's frustrating for him that he saw newer junior employees getting the help that
Mm-hmm.
he never got. But at the same time, exactly those external factors of, you shouldn't be doing bug fixes anymore. You should be doing feature work. How much does that play into like your happiness at work? I often think this about myself that I'm a pretty happy-go-lucky guy. I don't want much in life, but then I look at LinkedIn and I see my former colleagues who are now VPs or at much more successful companies than where I'm at, and I get this angst like, what am I doing with my career? Why aren't I a VP at Google or whatnot? And it's if I don't look at LinkedIn, I don't ever have that feeling. But when I hear those outside forces, it makes me feel bad about where I am.
Yeah, I think the big thing that plays into that, Jake, is the tech industry is definitely worse in this place because the wins are so big, and you definitely know someone who's had that win, where they get that IPO lottery ticket, and they don't need to work anymore. Maybe they're just working for fun, but you're still slaving away 9 to 5 trying to make things work, and it can make you feel like, what am I doing wrong when realistically it's just a matter of luck opposed to actual matter of work or skill to get there.
I'm glad you say that it's luck, because I sometimes do feel bad about myself that I don't own a $10 million house. So thank you for saying it. It's not a character flaw. And thanks for joining us this week. And we'll be back next month with a new episode of Tales from the SaaS Graveyard, unless one of us has an IPO that allows us to retire from this grind of podcasting.